my father was the maitre d' at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and he had his own restaurant. I used to think my father was in the mafia. All my friends thought he was in the mafia. So like, it was kind of funny because he wore a suit every day. He had that maitre d' mentality. We used to joke about it a lot as kids, but he was the best. He's the best, and he's still the best.
What's going on, man?
How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for bringing us back to this like incredible space. It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
And we like I said, we had dinner here last night, which was insane. Really, really good. At least one person I was with had already been here before, so she gave the same advice that you had, which was Negroni and the shrimp and the squash bottoms, which were really fucking good. But we didn't get the pizza bianco. So we dipped the shrimp sauce and a couple other things, but it was really good.
Oh, you got the hits.
It was. I mean, we ate a lot of food. Service was insane. It's like so good. Like everything was just, I was really impressed.
Thank you.
But and by the way, we'll sort of tee you up in a minute. But I just wanted to, we were just talking about getting into the space, and the minute that I walked in, I was like, this feels like, first of all, gorgeous space, and I want to talk about design with you because I don't understand why you so deeply sort of got into the design of the restaurants and why that's so important, but it's very clear that that's a big part of what you do. But man, I felt Keith McNally right away walking in, but more and different. And you were just sharing like the history of the space. I'd love maybe to share that again, because I thought that was pretty interesting, the background behind it, because it was, how you got into the space and what was originally was.
Yeah, so a guy named Richard Heyman is the original developer of all the projects that we have in Hollywood. And this building was acquired back in 2018. And being that it was, high ceilings, large space, it had the structural columns throughout the restaurant. It definitely felt like a big box kind of brasserie restaurant that you'd see in New York City, one like a Balthazar. And before this was Mother Wolf, there was discussions about this potentially being a Balthazar at one point that never panned out. But the idea of Balthazar is that it's a big restaurant, it's a high ceilings, it's got that big brasserie feel that brasserie restaurant feel that you see in New York and in London. And we were trying to bring that essentially to LA. And in absence of doing a Balthazar or something similar to that, we went with the Italian version of it.
Yeah, I mean. All right, so I'll wind everybody up. So your background is, you have hospitality in your DNA. Your dad was very famous maitre d' at the Beverly Hills Wilshire, and you worked for some of the best: Sam Nazarian, Michael Mina, Jose Andres. Now you have Mother Wolf, among other things. But we were chatting before this, and I still I know some of the projects that you have, but I would love to hear in your words, what it is that you do, what's your approach, how you think about building and developing, and then what are the projects that you have right now?
Yeah, sure. So I see myself entrepreneurial in this industry, and where I think some people in my position tend to have one group that they're a partner in or that they own and that they push that brand. I always like to work with different groups and partner with different people. For example, I'm the managing partner of Mother Wolf. We have Mother Wolf in Bar Avoya here in LA. We had the license deals in Vegas and Miami, but I'm also JV partners with Sam Nazarian on a brand called MXO and a brand called Hecho Libre. And I just really personally like to work with different people and different groups. And so I'm an entrepreneur. Essentially, and then in addition to that, I license brands. We're bringing Mont 32 from Hong Kong, Miznon from Tel Aviv, Malka from Tel Aviv, and I really enjoy working with just different people in the industry and trying to make projects happen in LA. I think more than me being managing partner of Mother Wolf Group or founder of Pagani Projects, I'm just a guy who's investing in LA and trying to make this city even better and bring great products to the city. And that's, I guess, what I'm focused on. But I look at people in other industries, like, not to be like cliche, but like look at a guy like Virgil Abloh, right? He had his clothing brand, Off-White, and then he was the creative director at Louis Vuitton, and he had like 100 other projects that he worked on. And when you listen to him talk about what he does, there's like creatively, it's super interesting to be involved with multiple projects at one time. And I just think it helps me be more creative and be more driven to do what I'm doing, because every single day I'm having 10 to 12 different conversations about different projects that I'm working on, and it's extremely fulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, my background is as a chef, and I think a lot of times, when we think about restaurants, especially as a chef, or even just as a as a hospitality person, we are thinking about, okay, what's my food, and I'm going to create a concept around that. And what can end up happening, not that it always does, is that you have somewhat of a narrow sort of view of like what the concept or business is, because you're looking at it, specifically from the product. And it seems like you almost have this studio model where you're like zooming out. Like, okay, how can I curate this entire experience? Food, okay, that's one part. I got to find a really incredible person, or group to like partner with to create incredible food. Obviously, that's table stakes. Service, got to make sure you have that. But then, you have this sort of approach to creating transformative experiences. Obviously, like creating these feelings and design. It definitely feels like that zooming out that you do helps you to build a concept that is really holistic. And I don't know if many people actually take that approach. I mean, there are some, obviously, I think that come to mind, but I'd love to hear, like, how did you sort of transition from, or maybe you didn't transition, this is just what it's always been. Like, how did you like land on, I'm going to curate these experiences and partner with people, as opposed to, I'm just going to build a concept and from the ground up, from 0 to 1 myself?
When you start becoming entrepreneurial, you start to develop ideas. And I think for me in the restaurant space, I started developing several ideas. And just through that process, you start to meet like-minded individuals. And then you start connecting the dots. And all of a sudden, you're working on a project with one chef, and you meet a developer on this side that wants something different. And I think through the process, it wasn't my intention to be this way. It's just through the process, I started getting more opportunities. And then when you have when you have one solid success, then 10 more opportunities come to light. And I think a lot of restaurateurs and hospitality companies try to create too many brands on their own. So if you've got a great Italian restaurant, you're like, oh, there's a need for a Chinese restaurant in the market. Well, let's find a chef and create a Chinese brand. I don't look at it that way. It's like a musician. Like, you can't have a platinum award-winning album every single time, right? So instead of me going and saying, oh, I'll go find a Chinese chef and try to create a Chinese concept, I look at who's the best group that's doing it currently, and let's see if we can partner with them. Because at the end of the day, the economics when you have a chef partner or when you have investors is very similar to just going and licensing a brand. There's variances to that, but it's actually pretty similar. And so for us to go and find a brand with multi-units that wants to have a presence in Los Angeles but doesn't want to set up shop here because California is historically pretty difficult, that's been the model. And so we've done that now with Ma 32, with Miznon from Tel Aviv, and the next one's going to be Malka. But I like that model, because then now all of a sudden, instead of me just finding a chef and creating a brand and that living within our ecosystem, now all of a sudden we're partnered with another great hospitality company who's got their own platform of projects happening. And so now the network just keeps expanding and the conversations are bigger, and now you're starting to get connections in other markets, and it's just more exciting.
I really do love it. I love this like approach. Yeah, it becomes way more collaborative, and you have so many more vested, people with vested interest that have to also think that same way about the business. I really love it, man. How do you think about, like, do you have any sort of rubric around deciding, okay, when you're going to license a brand versus a JV, a joint venture, versus, it sounds like you maybe never incubate something internally, but like, how do you think about when you do one versus the other?
I think it depends on the need in the market and the chef. If there's a chef that has a reputation, some restaurateurs, I think, like to find a chef, hire them, and develop them. I think that's very difficult in LA, especially right now. So I look for chefs that already have a reputation. Obviously, Evan, we found Evan. This was his second restaurant, but he already had a massive following in Los Angeles. And he's a huge success. But guys like Wes Avila, Chef Wes Avila is my for my Mexican concepts with Sam Nazarian. He's our culinary partner. That's somebody that already had some level of success, especially in LA with Gorilla Tacos. That I approached him and said, like, what's next for you? And then, developed that relationship and then started to find deals for him. But it's not necessarily my intent out the gate to say we're going to develop a brand or license a brand. I think the conversation starts with, if there's a need for something in the market, if we were to develop it, who would we call? If we were to license a brand, who would we call? And then just start having conversations and see what kind of is exciting. I think at the end of the day, partnering with another company and licensing their brand has so many benefits to it. One, you're getting a ton of marketing support, you're getting operational support, and it makes the process a bit simpler, especially when it's a tried and true concept. I think to start, you have an idea, this could work, and then let's start seeing, how to put this together, who we call. It's like, I guess, like producing a movie,
Yeah, no, it really is. It's almost like a studio model that you're doing. By the way, how did you meet Evan Funky? Or maybe better yet, why? Like, what happened? What was the impetus for partnering with him?
This goes back to the guy I would mention, Richard Heyman, who was kind of the visionary of this development in Hollywood. It's actually there's a unique story there, but him and his partner Grant essentially 10, 15 years ago had this vision for really making Hollywood a destination, where Hollywood hasn't really been a destination for people who live in the city for probably 20, 30 years. And so they raised something like $300 million and developed a dream hotel. They brought Tao Group from here and then developed the campus across the street, which is the Thompson Hotel, Tommy Hotel, and Citizen News. And along that process is where we all partnered together. When we were looking at the restaurant, which is now Mother Wolf, we were having conversations with some brands from New York. At one point, there was conversations with Keith McNally that never really panned out, but that was probably a dream to have him come to LA. How serious he was, we don't know, but it was a great dream. But we just loved the idea of doing this big box kind of brasserie style of restaurant. And so when we started looking at chefs, it's a very short list of chefs that could bring density to Hollywood, that had a big enough reputation to fill a restaurant that was over 200 seats. And top of the list was always Evan Funky, because he had such great success at Felix, and everybody's asking, what are you going to do next? And so I think it was good timing for us. COVID happened. He had actually turned down. Evan at one point had announced he was doing his next project in Beverly Hills, and I think it fell off. I'm not sure what happened there. But then we just started going to the restaurant, having dinner, and eventually met the guy, and there was some connections with his family, and we just started the courting process, which took about I'd say a year.
So what's that relationship like with a chef like Evan? How much is it, hey, just go do you, versus like, hey, here's the vision, can we stay within these parameters, versus like what is that like, that collaboration?
Evan Funky is a very unique chef in the sense that he is a restaurateur and can look at a project from all the angles. Obviously, he's an incredible chef and he's going to deliver on the food, but it's more than that. He looks at service, he looks at design. He's one of the few like restaurateur chefs who can kind of do and understand it all. And he's got a very clear vision of what he wants to do. And so, sure, from one perspective, we brought the idea of the brasserie, right? We hired Martin Brzezinski from London to design the project, which he's going to come with a lot of his own ideas. But in principle, it was doing a brasserie with Italian food. And so with that as the start, Evan was able to run with that in a major way. But Evan gets the most credit because he has such strong ideas.
Yeah. And again, I keep going back to why I love this model that you have for growing the business, is just finding like really great people and really facilitating, this thing. And it's so smart, man. I don't remember where you talked about this, but you were talking about the idea of like creating an institution, like evergreen brands, right? Things that just last forever. I think pretty often it's, there's an approach where you just try to figure out like, how can I get a lot of eyeballs up front, just whether it's a trend or something when you start a restaurant, and that fades. We all know that like fades over time. The things that last are the things that are, that create a connection, a feeling, and have that institutional feeling. Like Balthazar is a great example, right? Like there's a reason why that lasted forever. There's a feeling that you get when you're there, and that's rare, right? It's hard to do, and I think you're doing it now. I imagined that there must be some heuristics you think about of like from day one. What do I need to do to make sure this is an evergreen, concept? So I'd love to hear like how you think about that.
Well, I mean, everybody wants their restaurant to be an institution, and I think to start, you just have to build the best restaurant that you can build. And I think when we look at restaurants before and currently, is they've got to feel transportive. We invest heavily in the design of all the restaurants that we're involved in. And when people come in, there's got to be a wow factor that, for Mother Wolf as the reference, nobody was building 12,000 square foot restaurants with 250 seats that, had this Italian glamour. I mean, it was special, and it was different. And you see this in New York, you see this in Europe and in Dubai and areas like that, but no one was doing it in LA. And so I think when you walk in, it has to be impressive. You have to feel like, wow, this place, I didn't know this existed, or this is incredible. Or, that's the starting point. And you have to have incredible food, and you have to have consistency. And at the end of the day, you have to have very warm and attentive service. I think restaurants get away having like one or two components of that, but the institutions are the ones that have all those elements, and they're consistent. And that's built on like incredibly consistent standards of service, and holding people accountable, and bringing good energy, and developing a great culture where people have fun at work and want to be there, and creating an environment. But you have to do all of it. That's the hard part of the business, is that you have to do all of it every single day. And I like entertainment references because I love entertainment, but it's like putting a show on Broadway, which you hear all the time. When you open for service, the show's on. You have to be on point, and the team's got to be on point. And so I think where some restaurants, don't succeed is that they don't accept the responsibility of opening every single night and putting the show on. And it's relentless. You have to be relentless.
Yeah, you can't let any of those things slip. And it is a lot like a Broadway show, a restaurant, because literally every day, no matter what, it opens and people are coming in.
And people are critical.
Yeah, and they're critical from day one. But I think one thing that when I think about an institution, and maybe from the vantage of when you create a restaurant that right away can feel that way, is when you create something that even if it's a month old, it feels like it's been there forever. I got that feeling when I came in here. I do think a lot of it likely is design too, because good design is hard, right? Or great design is hard. Good design is pretty good, is pretty doable, but great design, where like all the little details that you maybe don't even notice but are there, that subconsciously create this entire experience, is really, really hard. And it seems like that somehow is a through line for you, design. I don't see any background from you in design, but like it seems like we're sitting in this fucking gorgeous space that clearly was very thought through, and you could create this same. So we're sitting in this sort of back bar room, which feels very speakeasy-esque, but still sort of democratic. And there's a lot of things here, like the bottles and the private cases and the ladders and things that could very easily become like a novelty in a place. But if it's done right, it just feels like it's been here forever, and it's gorgeous, and you right away feel like you're in this, in this new world, and you feel like that. So you feel like more special, right? That is really hard to accomplish in design. And again, I don't know you very well, but I can just see in the restaurants and just from your work that design seems to be really important to you. Like, where did that come from?
Well, you said, from the design perspective, this restaurant feels like it's been here for a long time. And I think when you're designing restaurants, I think you want it to feel like it's been there for a long time. You don't want it to necessarily feel new and shiny. I think restaurants need to feel warm. I think having a lot of like layers of wood and warm colors makes it feel like a place that's been here for a long time, because 75 years ago, they weren't designing restaurants like nightclubs that are dark, so there's, that idea of it being lived in and been here for a while comes from that. And I think the warmth of the restaurant is really important. I think that from a lighting perspective, you had dinner at Mother Wolf last night. It wasn't dark in Mother Wolf. it was bright. There's energy that's created from it being warm and bright. When it's too dark, I think you lose that. And so I think, I think it's like hard to pinpoint the exact reason why something becomes an institution or how you designed it. But I think most importantly, it's like, it's felt that it's been there for a while.
Yeah. I mean, are there brands both in the restaurant space and not in the restaurant space, whether they're inspirational to you or things that you look to for inspiration when you're thinking about creating a brand or a space?
I don't know if there's necessarily a brand. I get inspired from people who are doing a lot of different things, and kind of has their, are trying to pursue multiple avenues at once. And like the reference to Virgil Abloh is a good one of that, because I've just found it very inspiring that he didn't accept that you had to do one thing. In my career, especially in hospitality, I was always told that you need to focus on, if you're going to be a restaurateur, you need to either be a service expert or a chef, or you need to be a wine expert, or you need to be a cocktail expert. I'm like, I don't know if I need to do any of those things. I just need to understand how those things work and then find great people. And so I didn't like the idea of being pigeonholed to doing one thing. So then I was always inspired by people who didn't accept that and said, no, I'm going to have multiple disciplines, and I'm going to just do my best and try to be successful at all these things. And I think it works for some people, maybe it doesn't work for other, but it's exciting.
Yeah.
We'll see if it works out for me in 10 years if we're having this conversation again.
No, I mean, it really is like, it takes like, there's a bit of risk, not risk so much, but you have to have a level of confidence, because you do get that, like, you'll always have those haters. You'll be like, you don't know about food. You don't know, you're not a wine expert. You're not this. We were just talking about Rick Rubin last night. It's a perfect example. He doesn't know anything about music. He'll be the first one to tell you, I don't know how to write music. I'm not technical, but he understands what good looks like.
Yeah.
And, I have to imagine that might be some sort of inspiration for you as well. Just thinking about like, okay, what does good look like? And how do I get the right people to be their best in the thing in one place? So are there other people like that inspire you?
Probably one of my longest mentors and is a really dear friend of mine is Sam Nazarian. And he does a lot. He's in the restaurant business, he's in the nightclub business, he's in the hotel business. And I think I learned that from a tactical perspective a lot from being with him, because I'll go sit in his office in Miami, and the conversations that we'll have throughout a day, it covers like so many different verticals in our industry. And he's somebody who's able to just kind of bounce between and kind of move through those different conversations and those different projects that are happening. And so I learned a lot of that, I think, from just being around him, because he's another person that, is not confined to doing one thing.
What's he like to work with?
Sam's probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he's got incredible confidence in what he's doing. And he's a pusher. And there's a tremendous amount of respect for Sam, because he, it's funny because you look at a guy like him who grew up with a very wealthy family and probably could have just sat around and did nothing with his life. But instead, he's at the office even today. He's 50 years old at 6 a.m. every single day, works till 7 p.m. and just grinds. And he's in his office and he's hustling and he's creating new projects and he's pushing his team and he's just on it nonstop. And I've never met anybody that execute at that level. He's a beast.
What are other things that you do today that you picked up from him?
A lot. One of the things I learned from him and from people that have worked with him is just doing things now and addressing things right now and getting them out of the way. That way you can move on with your day. If there's an issue, just address it. Don't kick things down the field. In my day-to-day, I deal with a lot of, not problems, but just things that come up. And I just try to attack them, get them out of the way and move on to the next thing. That way my day's freed up and I can just keep going. I think in our business, sometimes you get so bogged down by how many things or how many moving parts there is throughout the day. So I feel like if you're not tackling each one as it comes, then you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. I don't ever feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle. As many projects that I have going on, I just deal with things in the moment, move on and keep it going all day long. And I never feel backed up. I always feel like I'm like, oh, all right, I got some free time now.
Do you have a task? Like, how do you manage all your things to do?
I'm old school. I write things down on paper, kind of like I think you do.
Yep.
I've tried apps, but then I spend too much time on my phone if I'm looking at lists, and so I just like to write things down that are important for me to get done for the day. And then I look at like some things that I need to tackle for the week, and then the rest of it just comes as it comes.
So do you ever, I mean, how do you think about like prioritizing? One thing that I'm sure we have the same challenge. There's a million things that come our way. Every like team has something that they need solved. Every new contracts you got to think through. Like how do you prioritize?
Did you ever read that book, The One Thing?
Yeah.
That was it. I forget what the quote is, but it's like, what is the one thing that if by doing this one thing, everything will move forward and nothing else really, matters? I don't remember what it was. Don't quote me on that one. But he would say that you do that in your health of your life, you do it with your family, you do that with work. So like, what's the one thing that I got to do today that if by doing this thing, everything else is going to fall into place? That's exactly how I look at it.
Yeah, I have a similar premise. So there's two things I do. Like one is I have what they're called MITs. So at any given time, like I can only have 2, maybe 3 things that are like, these are what's most important right now. So hire these 2 executives. It might be one of those things. And then one other thing at most. And then basically everything on my calendar, is prioritized by like, is it solving that or not?
Yeah.
And if it's not, like my assistant knows, just like, okay,
Yeah.
deprioritize, like don't even do it or like push it. And then if I happen to get to those things after, then I will. I try to do that same premise. It's hard. Like, okay, here's 12 problems that we have. What's one thing that I could do that would, in doing that, would solve these other 12?
Yeah.
You can always find it, but it's great when you do.
But I also stopped worrying about not being good at other things.
Yeah, that's true.
When I worked for Sam Nazarian for 8 years, and I started as a service captain when I was 20 years old. And by the time I had left, I didn't work in the job, but the last position I accepted was the vice president of the East Coast of food and beverage when I was like 28 or 29 years old, which I signed the offer, and then a week later I resigned to go be an entrepreneur. But when I worked for Sam, I had a reputation of just being like on it all the time, and I cared so much about being good at everything. And I think that desire to be good at everything was how I learned everything, because I wanted to understand it. But now I'm not a people pleaser necessarily, and I'm good at what I'm good at, which is driving projects forward, creating partnerships, and more. But like the small minutia, if someone's like, "Oh, you didn't do great at them," I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay. You don't need to be good at everything." And so I think as you get older, I think that's naturally what happens as you get older and more mature in your career. But I just don't worry about it. And if someone doesn't like what I did, I'm like, "All right, that's cool."
No, I think it does go back to that same confidence level you have to have. Like, okay, this is what I'm good at. This is my superpower. And, everything else, just find really good people that are better at that and love doing it.
That's the thing, dude. You have to have a great team around you. Yeah. Especially in this business, like this is not a one person show. This is an entire team. Mother Wolf, we have over 100 employees that make this happen every single day. I'm not creating Mother Wolf was a team of people, from design and concept. And it wasn't just one person.
I'm just gonna sort of like another direction here for a minute, because I'm super curious. You have a bunch of deals that you're working on, or at least that you're considering, right? And the way that you are building concepts, developing concepts, licensing things, there's a lot of moving parts where a lot of people need to agree to something, right? You have a culinary or F&B team, you have a design team, you have, maybe operation, whatever the, these different teams are. So I have to imagine that the deals that you're doing are somewhat complex. Do you have any or maybe they're not, but are there things that you think about that are like non-negotiables for signing a deal? Meaning like whether it's a restaurant lease or a JV, like a joint venture or license, like look, if these things aren't in place, it's a no-go.
Yeah, well, I think in principle, when you're entering into a JV or you're entering into a license, it's got to be mutually beneficial to all parties. I think starting there is really important. I think sometimes there's deals that get created that are one-sided, especially in this industry. You see that a lot in like management contracts, where it's you have an operator who only cares about getting their top line percentage. They don't care about profitability. So I think deals need to be structured that everybody's very focused on the deal and everybody's incentivized. And I think in principle that limits the kind of frustration that arises through the process. you go through the honeymoon phase pre-opening, but then when things get tough, you want everybody to be aligned. And I think so structuring deals that way is really important. I think in bigger deals, there tends to be more parties involved. You've got bigger financing, you've got multiple partners, there's a lot of decision making that you have to go through and you have to agree on, which are great, which is why I love smaller deals. I love what I'm doing with Miznon right now, which is the fast casual pita shop from Tel Aviv. I love the food product. I love Chef A.L. Shani. He's such a unique character, so I just love being around that. He's totally an artist. But those deals are small deals. They're small capital raises. I can find locations that are not AAA locations. They're like, sub AAA, like B tier locations. Yeah. And I try to structure those deals with the good people group who that are inexpensive to open. That way, I don't really need partners. It's just us and the good people group. And those are the best deals because it's much simpler when you have less people making decisions and less opinions.
How is there like a typical like structure of whether it's like how do you structure the unit economics of these deals when you have an F&B partner? Is there a certain way that you always go about it? Is it like a percentage of top line? Is it, like rent and then it's something on top of that once for hitting milestones? Like how do you typically like to structure these partnerships with an F&B company like that?
Well, when you work with different groups have their own ways of doing business. So if I'm I guess in a studio environment, the studio is the one that's creating the contracts and dictating to everybody, how this is going to go. But in our business, it's a little bit different. If I want to go to Mall 32, their standards of doing business are different than the Good People group, and it's different than Evan Funky's. So I think it's in my best interest to be flexible on my end and work with them on their standards of how deals get structured, and then try to make sure that at the end of the day, it's all beneficial to everybody and everybody's aligned. But I think there are standard like management deal contracts with third-party operators and licensed contracts. But I just think we try to be flexible. If you've done 8 to 10 of the same concept and I'm licensing it from you, well, you're going to prioritize what you've done for those 8 to 10 deals.
Is there like an ideal way, like the perfect structure, if you could have it in every deal?
There's too many elements, there's too many elements. I don't know if there's a perfect deal.
What I mean, like, I guess maybe just generally speaking, do you prefer there to be a heavily vested interest in the overall, economics of the business, or do you prefer to sort of fund it and let them do their thing, but the overall sort of EBITDA is on you?
No, I get what you're saying. The entrepreneurial side of me is that I want to have the most control of the deal and the setup of the deal, the fundraising of the deal, the operations of the deal. Not because I'm a control freak, but at the end of the day, I'm always going to bet on myself. And I've been in situations where we've participated from like kind of an arm's length, and when things aren't going well and you try to fix them, it's much more difficult because now you're dealing with egos, you're dealing with other operators. And so at the end of the day, if I'm going to do a project, I'm not going to do a project where I can't go in and make the decision day of to move the business forward. So that's why I think, and that's why a lot of people want control of deals, because at the end of the day, you're betting on yourself and you want to be able to make the decision and not have to go through bureaucracy to make any decisions. And it's easy when things are going really well. Like if things are going well, everybody's happy, nobody's stressed out. But the day you have the Palisades fires and the city goes like dark, and now you have to make really tough decisions, you want to be able to make decisions fast.
Yeah. Is there any time that you've kind of, I don't want to say gotten burned, and actually that's a terrible way to put it, but like in terms of deals that were set up, you're like, man, I really wish I had set this up differently.
I won't mention which one specifically it was, but I just don't like doing deals where we're participating at arm's length.
Yeah,
and that's happened before, where when things weren't going extremely well, it was difficult to mobilize because at the end of the day, you want to fix all the problems, but you're also not responsible for someone else is getting paid to fix those problems. So you're like, well, what are you here for?
Yeah.
But again, so now I just try to avoid that situation by saying, hey, we're just not going to do that.
how does menu design work once you decide to partner with a Mizzone or a Evan? Are you involved in that at all? When does it happen? Is it happening like before you're ever talking about the, getting together?
We focus on Los Angeles restaurants. I'm an Angelino. I'm born and raised here. So I feel like I have a pretty good sensibility of what works in LA. Not 100% track record, but I have a good sense of it. Evan Funky is the same. He grew up in LA. He's very successful. You don't really have to question him. I always like to just speak my mind if I have a strong opinion on something, and try to give my perspective to a chef from the guest perspective and from the front of house perspective. And I think typically what I'm saying is pretty sensible. And so I feel like Evan would be receptive to that. But then when you work with brands like Ma 32, or it's not about trying to tell them how to change the menu or to make changes to the menu. It's just trying to help them understand what we know about LA diners, and then allow them to adjust the menu to the market. And a good example of that is Ma 32 is really well known for having a lot of obscure dishes that appeal to like a very finite like Chinese demographic. Do I know if that will work here? I'm not sure yet. There could be a market for it, but investing in having like 10 to 15 menu items might be excessive. So it's like, all right, why don't we try with a couple of menu items when we open? And if it's a hit, then expand on it. If not, we'll take it away. And I think just being a little bit more cautious of that.
Yeah. And I imagine that you want to also have at least some control over how that can play out.
Yeah.
Are there some parameters that are also like requirements, like certain margins, like look, food cost has to be X, or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if your food cost isn't around like the 24%, 25%, it's really difficult because labor is so expensive in Los Angeles. Mother Wolf's great because it's flour and water, and so your margins are really, really healthy on the food cost side. But when you start creeping into like the high 20s, it's difficult.
Yeah, and usually structured deals where like that's part of the other benchmarks they have to hit in terms of like,
yeah. I mean, there are benchmarks, but I think in the spirit of a great partnership, I think you just try to align on all the points and try to help each other to get there. It's not like I'm never going to be in a position where we license a brand and then they come in and say, well, these are our margins and you just have to accept it. Like, we just wouldn't do business with someone like that. It's like, hey, from the beginning, what are your margins? Great. Sometimes I think we can do better. I'm like, well, we're pretty organized. We have great standards of service. I think we can get that down a point or two, and that's it. But it's very collaborative. And if there's issues, I like to be able to call my partner and say, hey, this is going on. They're like, no problem. We'll get on it.
Yeah. Yeah. But by the way, you said you know what like diners in LA like like what the food should be. What is it? Can you explain that? Like, and like how is that different from like New York?
I think in LA, people really want to feel connected to the chef and to the story of the concept, whether it's a chef driven or if it's like a restaurateur driven. But I think most importantly, chef driven works really well in Los Angeles. And I think to be a big restaurant that appeals to an LA, like the LA audience, I think your food can't be too precious. It has to be food that you feel like you can eat, multiple times a month. And I think Mother Wolf's a great example of that. Our food is solid. I mean, I think we have the best pizza in the city, but it's not complex. It's Evan's like maniacal commitment to consistency and making sure that when you have that pizza, it's the same every single time. And you're always going to have your different opinion of what's great pizza. I like our style of pizza because it's got a thinner crust and it's got a crispy undercarriage, but it's consistent. When you go to Mother Wolf, I mean, it can't be perfect 100% of the time, but we're like there like 95%, I think, on the food side. And so I think at the end of the day, Mother Wolf is this beautiful restaurant. It's big. It's got Evan Funky behind it. And so there's all these things that before you arrive here, there's all these expectations. But at the end of the day, people understand margarita pizza and cacio e pepe and bistecca florentina, and it's like not complex, And so I think restaurants that do that food very well they execute at a high level, they use good quality ingredients. I think that's what people like here.
Yeah. I feel like that's almost universal, right?
It is. Look at a place like Javier's restaurant. Have you been to Javier's yet? Javier's is a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant that started down in Newport Beach, and now they have multi-locations. Their restaurants are doing like, the average unit's doing like $33 million per location. It's absurd. They're big restaurants. They're probably like 250 to 300 seat restaurants. There's one at Century City. I've heard rumors that it does like 35 million a year. They opened in downtown LA this year. Nobody's opening in downtown LA anymore, big restaurants. They opened Javier's, and I heard the numbers are consistent with Century City, which is absurd. And by the way, you're just getting like a solid $30 chicken quesadilla. It's good. I like it. We go all the time, but like the food is not complex. It's got enchiladas. It's got some steak dishes, but it's just like a very like mid-market Mexican restaurant. But they crush it. But it's packed because at the end of the day, people know the food, and it's not too precious. It's not overly. It's like sometimes restaurants can do too much with a dish.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think, we were talking about this with institutions, but like I think the most important thing in any restaurant is just consistency. Be consistent, honestly, in life, really. Just, can you do something consistently over time? Yeah. And by the way, that doesn't mean it needs to be insane. Like, as long as it's good, right? But whatever it is, whether it's good or great or incredible, can you do that every single day? Because people don't come back.
And the food, I think the food can't be too intense.
Yeah. And if it is, you're not going to have frequency, but at the very least, I think what's hard about that is it's hard to keep that up over time as well. There's, whether it's, something like Javier's, which is probably pretty simple food, but they figured out how to make sure they execute it the same time every single time you go. Or if you go to Mother Wolf and it's the same time every time you go, or you go to Noma, right? And at least you know what to expect, and you're going to get that thing every single time. You got to be able to like execute and deliver on the thing that you said in the beginning every single time.
You want to be reliable.
Yeah. It's like the most important thing. Speaking of that, like it does seem like you also think a lot about like developing your team from within. You probably, I imagine you learned a lot of that from Mina and others that you work for. How do you think about like developing like your bench of talent?
Well, you have to build a bench, and I think the best way to build a bench is from within. And the most loyal people you'll have in your company are the people that started with you, probably at some level, like 3-4 steps below. I was fortunate when I was really young to start working with Michael. I was 16 when we opened Sea Blue at MGM in Las Vegas. Went to high school in Vegas, and my dad's like, You were 16? Yeah, I was 16. My dad's like, you got to get a job. He's like, this guy, Michael Mina's opening a restaurant at MGM Grand called Sea Blue. He's like, you should go be a busboy there. And I was like, okay, cool. And it was hard work. I was going to school full time, and then I was going to work after, and I was staying at work till 12, 1, 2 in the morning, and then going back to school the next day. And it was a grind. It was really hard work, but I liked being in the restaurant, and I had good mentors. A guy named Patrick Hummel, who moved on to be the president of Media Group and is now with MGM Resorts. He was this cool guy that was the GM, and I was like, I could aspire to be that guy. And so and then he looked at what he looked at in me was that I was very hardworking, I was dedicated, and I was disciplined, and he saw that and then helped develop me. And he was like the first mentor I had. And so now in our organization, when I'm looking at who's going to be the next person that we start to develop, first thing we look for is like, who's very disciplined, who shows up every single day, is like relentless about being on time, whose uniform is always pressed, who always takes good care of their appearance and their grooming, who always polishes their shoes. Like, who are those people who have the discipline? Because this business takes a tremendous amount of discipline. And then from there, you just start to slowly develop these people in their positions, and then see what their appetite for a bit of growth is. Are they eager to learn more? Do they want to move up through the ranks? And I think in a restaurant, you'll have like, 3, 4, 5 of those people that you can eventually develop, do
you have like systems, or like how do you operationalize that? It's one thing like, let's make sure we find these folks and develop. And I totally agree with that. You got to like earn the right to be mentored. But like, are there any systems in place for your team to know, okay, we identify this person and now our job is to do X and this is how we do it?
Well, first of all, we have very consistent standards of service. We were in the restaurants. We use a lot of checklists. We have systems set up for consistency. But it's really in our like weekly management meetings that I talk to the team, and we talk through the employees that work for us, and try to identify like who's doing great, and we really just talk through it. And then if there's somebody that stands out, then we'll start to be like, all right, well, why don't we try to give them more opportunity, or start doing one-on-ones. One of the best tools, which a lot of managers don't do this at all, not enough, but in a lot of restaurants, is one-on-ones. And so if you're having one-on-ones, it doesn't have to be every single day, but if you have a team of 100 employees, every month, a manager should have had a one-on-one with at least one of the employees, right? So like if you're in charge of the servers, then every month you should have had a one-on-one with each of your servers. And that's how you keep your finger on the pulse. That's how you see who's still engaged. That's how you find out what's wrong in the restaurant. But it's a simple conversation. Doesn't need to be formal, but it's just a sit down like this and just saying, hey, what's going on? How's it going? What's new? How's your family? Are you still happy being here? Is there anything we can fix? And it's like that 3 to 5 minute conversation gives you so much knowledge in your business. And if you can be the type of manager or owner or operator that takes that conversation, says, okay, actually, that's good feedback, we'll adjust that.
Yeah. I totally agree, Ben. Are there times when you're thinking about a new project that the impetus for it is, I got someone, they're really good, there's nowhere else for them to move,
100%.
And now I got to find a place for them?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often does that happen?
I'm in it right now.
Yeah.
It's like I've got team members where I'm like, man, if I don't continue to build a path for them, then they're gonna end up going somewhere else.
It's a great sign. It's a great feeling. It's also a ton of pressure, right? Because you're like, man, this person is not going to be.
I want to do it anyways, though. I want to do it anyways. But I have I think one thing with me is that, and I don't know how long I'll be able to keep this going, but I keep a very tight team, and I don't necessarily want that team to expand too much. I want to be able to, like, I would rather have, call it 10 restaurants in LA that I can manage with this one team, and we all do well, and we all have opportunity financially to make more money and all these things, than try to grow too big and have too big of a corporate team or too many people that I'm trying to grow. So I would rather just focus on the team that I have. And it creates some limits, because at a certain point, if you're working for them, there's a ceiling for you, because ideally they're not going anywhere. But that's okay, because I started off and I want to take care of this one core group of my team members, and there's going to be some limit to our growth as a result. But at the end of the day, you see this all the time. Companies get too big. They grow their corporate teams too aggressively. They have too great of salaries on payroll, and eventually it doesn't last. Actually, I don't know any of the groups that have lasted. Like people that were kind of like early employees at the corporate level that 10, 15 years later are still there. And all of the companies I could reference are companies that grew really fast. They grew nationwide. They got huge corporate payrolls, and then eventually they scaled down.
Yeah. No,
it's all the companies that I worked for, the groups it went through that.
Yeah.
No,
it's true. Yeah. Or they have to sort of kind of commoditize or change into a different type of company, and then there's a different person that you end up having to hire.
But it's different. Yeah. So if I can create a company on my end, or create projects that give, I have a great culinary director. He's been with me for 5 years now.
Yeah.
I asked him, like, what's your idea of retirement? What do you want to do? And his response was simple. He's like, I want to buy a cabin up near like the Redwoods and Yosemite area. I'm like, we're going to figure out how to make that happen. Just stick with me. We're going to make that happen. But I would get the greatest pleasure in life if in 10, 15, 20 years from now, he's retired and that's where he's at.
Yeah.
But you can't do that for everybody.
Yeah. No, I love that though. Well, I mean, look, you like I said, we said this in the beginning, like your DNA is definitely hospitality. Your dad was a pretty well-known maitre d'. What's your guys' relationship like?
Oh man, it's amazing.
Tell me about it.
Growing up, I've always respected and loved my father, and I certainly admired him. It's pretty funny because when I was, probably like 8 to 13 years old, in that age range, my father was the maitre d' at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Then he had his own restaurant. I used to think my father was in the mafia. All my friends thought he was in the mafia. So like, it was kind of funny because he wore a suit every day. He had that that maitre d mentality. We used to joke about it a lot as kids, but he was the best. He's the best, and he's still the best. And so he's the one who got me into hospitality, a little bit by force, but we appreciate him now. But now my father actually, he consults with me on all the projects. And 2 years ago, he's been in Vegas for like the past like 20 something years. But 2 years ago, our general manager of Mother Wolf took another opportunity in Beverly Hills. And the issue that I've been having with managers in LA is that this generation that my father comes from of restaurateur, maitre d', general manager, whatever you call it, it's kind of a dying breed. There's people who have hospitality in their blood through and through, and the way they present themselves in the restaurant, the way they move through a dining room, the way they interact with guests and with staff is like, you got to learn it from someone like that. I learned it really young from Mina Group because, I learned a tremendous amount from those guys. So I actually asked my dad 2 years ago, I said, hey, can you come to LA and can you spend some time with the management here? And I said, I just want you to rub off on them a little bit. And so that they see what your generation of maitre d' general manager is like. And it was, on one hand, you have somebody who's like things are black and white, and it can be a bit of he can be tough. It's like firm but fair. And so I think the team wasn't necessarily used to that, but he's consistent. And every single day he comes in and he goes, what's going on with your shoes? Did you shine them today? Why is your collar a little bit yellow? Right? Whatever it is. And so now, now I have 3 generations of Paganis in the house. I got me, my 2.5-year-old son, and my dad, and we spend a lot of time together. And my dad works with me, and
So
it's
cool.
the greatest. It's honestly it's the greatest.
What do you think he's most? What do you think he's most proud of you for?
I mean, he's a great dad, so he says it all the time. But like, I think he's just proud that I keep going. I keep building, and I take care of a lot of people around me, and I don't know. I think he's just, my dad took his stab at being an entrepreneur. He had a restaurant in the late 90s in West Hollywood called Pagani. And it lasted about 2 years, different time. And I think for him to see that I've followed the path, but also kind of gone for a bit further, I think he's really proud.
Yeah. You think there's anything that he's like frustrated with you about?
Yeah. I am who I am at work, at home, all this stuff. And I'm just like, I'm very direct. And it's funny because when he moved into my house, after like a month of like working with me, being at the house, he came to me and said, Giancarlo, I know you're the boss. But he goes, at home, I'm your father. And it resonated. I'm like shit.
Yeah.
It's
such an
because I come home and I'm just like, what's happening here? Why's your car on the driveway? I gotta leave at 9 a.m. Move your, he's like, slow down.
Yeah.
I'm still your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. My dad passed away when I was 16, and he wanted me to go to Wharton. He never even knew I was going to be a chef. I feel like he probably would have been upset if he found it out. Although now I guess I'm in business, but there's like a million things I would have said to him now. And I know you're close to your dad. You guys like talk all the time, but do you think there's anything that you don't say to him enough, or that you feel like you've never said to him that you'd want to tell him?
No, I mean, I feel bad that I'm always so direct, and like sometimes I have to like take a step back and be like, give him a hug and be like, we're family. That's the things I think about a lot because I'm just go. I'm so busy all the time, and I just don't. I don't really treat people differently, and so I think that's typically what I regret with him, is that sometimes I'm too direct with him. But I did have a conversation with like 6 months ago where, at the end of the night, he'll come home or in the morning and I'm having my coffee and he'll sit down and he'll immediately start talking about work. And I tell him, no talking about work at home anymore. I'm like, we gotta kick that habit. Yeah. Because then it becomes like we never get away from it. Yeah. And now it's like we just try to have a relationship where it's not all about work. And to be honest, once he starts talking about things related to work, I'm like, we'll talk about it later. You know? And I'm pretty disciplined, and that's when I'm really direct. I'm like, Dad, stop. And he's just like, yeah, you're right. Because it's like, let's talk about something else. Like,
It's tough. I was just talking about this yesterday, actually on the panel with Mina and them. We are, as entrepreneurs, we're just always on. We're always going, and there's, it's inevitable. You can't be this and not do that. But you do have to find those times to stop. Kids are like the best forcing function for that. I always find at home. My wife is like, she'll know. Like it'll be like a Sunday afternoon, and we're at the park with the kids, and she's like, "See where your head is at right now. You're like thinking about something in your head." And you do have to find those times. You got to find the time you can just stop and be, because especially when we have kids, like you got a 2.5-year-old, I got a 4 and 6-year-old. That goes by fast.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm already through my first marriage, so that mentality probably didn't work out too well for me. So that's another good learning thing, where it's like now I got to take a step back and be like, okay, at home you have to try to be different than you are when you're at work, but it's difficult because you're just on all the time. And even when you're home, people don't allow you to be home. You're just still getting hit up all day long. Doesn't matter where you are. So you're always on to an extent. But with kids and with the girlfriend or the wife, you gotta give them the time.
Yep. Well, I mean, I love that you're so multidisciplinary, and that's how you're building this thing. Is there just like future looking? Is there something that you haven't really gotten deep into the weeds that you want to start working on too?
I think we're in one of the hardest businesses, and I love this business, and it's like it's what drives me. I'm always thinking about what can I be doing still within the industry, but not in opening and operating a restaurant. And I just haven't found that thing just yet. And I've had some ideas and concepts, and I just haven't really pursued anything so
like what? What are some of those ideas?
Well, my partner Wes Avila and I, he guy makes the best hot sauce, and so we at one point thought about why don't we start, co-packing hot sauce, and it was just an idea. I think that might not be too viable right today, but I just think that I'd like to try doing things, at least one business where it's not operating a restaurant.
Yeah. Love it, man. Well, I'm excited to keep following your journey, and thanks for taking this time, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.